Welcome to the next session, everyone. Before we get started, I do have a special request from the organizers. If you have seen it's a little thing about this big with a whole bunch of dongles attached to it, please return it to the front of the room. It's gone missing, and it's very hard for people to present if we don't have it. So if you have accidentally taken it or seen it somewhere, please return it to the front of the room. Great. So, I'm Hannah. I am moderating this next session. I am going to be very strict with timekeeping because this session is the only thing between you and lunch. It's a really exciting session. So the session is on fairness and NLP and computer vision. And we have three fantastic papers in this session, one on computer vision, one on NLP, and one on sort of a mixture of both. The first paper that we're going to hear about focuses on the intersection of gender and race in the context of facial analysis algorithms, showing, among other things, that 3 commercial gender classification systems are particularly bad at classifying darker-skinned women. And we're talking about error rates of up to 34.7% as compared with error rates of about 0.8% for lighter-skinned men. So a truly staggering difference there. The second paper we're going to hear about focuses on analyzing, detecting, and removing gender stereotypes from Bollywood movies via semantic modeling. Using 3 different types of data, so Wikipedia pages, movie scripts, and movie trailers, the authors demonstrate the presence of gender bias, but also, encouragingly, identify 30 movies over the past 3 years where gender stereotypes were broken. And then finally, the third paper focuses on the limits of automated social media content analysis. So the premise of this paper, which I fully agree with, is that tools for analyzing social media have 5 key limitations which negatively affect their ability to parse the meaning of human communication or detect speaker intent. Okay, so I hope I've convinced you that this is going to be a truly fascinating session. And with that, I'm going to hand over to our first speaker, Joy.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Joy Buolamwini, also known as Poet of Code, founder of the Algorithmic Justice League, and a first-year PhD student at MIT. I'm joined on this paper by Dr. Timnit Gebru in the front over here, who is currently at Microsoft Research doing her postdoc. So let's get into it. What was the motivation for doing gender classification in the first place? Broadly, I've been interested in automated facial analysis, which can involve many different kinds of tasks. So the first task is there a face in the first place, right? Face detection. After that, there are other things you can do, such as trying to figure out what kind of face there is, and this is what I focus on the paper, classifying the attribute of gender, but you can also do age, emotion, and other things. There's also facial recognition, and a lot of the media around this paper talks about facial recognition, which isn't exactly what I do. And that is focused on either identification, so think trying to find a missing person or criminal suspect, one-to-many identification, or facial verification, so unlocking a phone with your face for authentication. So my focus at first was broad because I had the experience of running into issues with facial analysis technology when I was working on projects. So I'd have lighter-skinned people, their faces would be detected in the same lighting conditions. I would come on, face not detected, put on a white mask, and it's all right. I was like, this looks a little weird. So I decided to explore this further. And again, I mentioned there are many different types of facial analysis tasks. So I wanted to see how commercial companies were doing. And so first I was curious about detection, but as I looked into detection, in the cases when I was detected, I kept being labeled as male. I was like, is it just because of my unique face morphology, or is there something more at play? And this became a more urgent question when I read the perpetual lineup report that came out of Georgetown Law showing that over 130 million adults in the US currently has their face in a facial recognition network that can be searched unwarranted with algorithms that haven't been recently audited for accuracy. Where gender classification comes into play is gender classification can be used for soft biometrics. So let's say we're looking for a criminal suspect who is 22, black, male. If I'm being misidentified, this could put me under intense scrutiny that is unwarranted. So in order to figure out how well these systems were doing, I wanted to find a suitable benchmark. So instead of reinventing the wheel, I thought I would just look at existing benchmarks. But when I looked at the existing benchmarks, they had a few limitations. So the US government benchmark, IJB-A from NIST, the National Institute for Standards and Technology, was largely pale and male. So we see 75% men in the data set, 80% lighter skin. Adience, which is a gender and age classification benchmark by construction, did a lot better on gender parity, 52% female. But when I looked at the representation of lighter-skinned individuals, again, it was overwhelmingly lighter skin. So, given that the existing benchmarks were not suitable for what I wanted to explore, I made a new benchmark, the Pilot Parliaments benchmark. It's composed of 1,270 images from 6 countries, 3 African countries and 3 European countries. It does a bit better. It's 54% male and also about 54% lighter-skinned individuals. Now, one of the things that is really important about the paper Timnit and I wrote together is how we labeled the benchmark. Yes, we use binary gender labels because the results that are returned by the APIs give us binary gender labels. Not to say binary gender labels are a de facto that should be kept. We also decided to not just do demographic labeling, but phenotypic labeling. So of course this work has relevance to race, but we didn't actually tag or classify our images by race. We use skin type being a more objective measure. And so we chose the Fitzpatrick skin type classification scale, which is used by dermatologists. But even this has its limitations. I didn't know there were so many shades of white, but the first 3 are different types of lighter-skinned individuals. When the benchmark first came out in the late 70s, it was a 4-point classification scale. So you had the first 3 categories and then the rest of the world. In the late 80s, they expanded it to add 3 more. But as you can see, it's not quite a full capture of the sepia rainbow that makes up humanity. So to our knowledge, this is the first gender and skin type labeled gender classification benchmark, but it has its limitations. It's a very small benchmark in the first place of only unique subjects. So I've had a lot of people reaching out to do facial recognition benchmarking with this. There's no other face to recognize in this particular benchmark because you only have 1 image per unique individual. It's also a relatively easy benchmark. I took headshots of parliamentarians. It doesn't get much easier than this. Looking straight at the camera, limited yaw angle, expression, not too varied. So overall, I thought this would be a simple way to test some existing companies' systems. So now with this novel yet limited benchmark, I wanted to see how accurate IBM, Face++, and Microsoft were when it came to classifying the gender of the faces in the PPB data set. So let's first look at overall accuracy, positive predictive value. If you just look at the aggregate numbers, which is generally how we do this kind of analysis, we might feel okay. Microsoft, 94%, Face++, 90%, IBM, 88%. But even though a lot of the literature that I looked at, even for gender classification, only reported overall accuracy. We wanted to see accuracy by gender, by skin type, and also the intersection. So if we break it down to look at accuracy by gender, we see there's an 8 to 21% error gap in terms of the accuracy between classifying female faces and classifying male faces. Face++ struggles the most at around, what do we have here? 79%, and then we have 94% on IBM for male faces. So looking beyond the demographic, we went to a phenotypic attribute, which was accuracy on skin type. And here we also see a gap, a 12 to 9% error gap between best classified and worst classified group here. Then we did something that hasn't been done before, which was to do, to my knowledge, the first peer-reviewed intersectional evaluation for gender classification, splitting it into 4 subgroups that you see here. So with Microsoft, we see that there's perfect performance, lighter males, well done. But when we move to lighter females, we see it starts to dip. Darker males, it dips a little bit. Darker females, we're at 79%. This was the best performing company. These are the good numbers. Then we move to Face++. Here we see darker males are the best classified. So with some of the headlines, there's been a focus on just lighter males and darker females, but there's a lot more to the story than that. So I do encourage you to read the paper. So here, you see darker males are just marginally better classified. Lighter females, not so bad. Lighter males, not so bad. Darker females, wow. All right, then we get to IBM, and again we see that darker skin performance is overall lower than lighter skin performance, but it's not as clear-cut when we look at male and female performance, right? So we have 93% performance on lighter females, where we have 88% performance on darker males. So this is why the intersectional analysis is really important. It's not as clear-cut. As always, males are better than females, lighter better than darker, etc. We really have to look. Now, if we do error rates by female, by intersectional, by the skin type, we'll see that we get close to a flip of a coin on a binary classification task when we're looking at type 6 women. Women like me, very much at the end there. So in the supplement of the paper, we do a breakdown of this for males and females for all the companies, for all the skin types, what's reported in the media, and so forth. This all aggregates lighter skin as type 1 to type 3, as you saw earlier, and darker skin type 4 to type 6. So that actually bumped these numbers up a little bit. So once the paper was accepted into FAT, on December 22nd, I sent all of the companies a pre-release of the paper to let them know the results and see how they would respond. And I got a range of responses. First response was no response. But on their terms of services, they do not promise anything at all. Not that it'll be error-free, not that they'll fix anything, so it's really up to you. So even though I didn't hear from Face++, I did read the Chinese media, and a company representative is quoted as saying they were not able to find our benchmark on GitHub, and so weren't able to engage. We never put the benchmark on GitHub. Microsoft. Reached out to Microsoft, they got back within the new year and are taking steps to improve their system. So if you want to read the full response from Microsoft, this is the site to go to, gendershades.org/doc/msft.pdf. IBM, wow, I was impressed. They replicated the paper internally told me they found similar results with the old API, released a new API yesterday, have a 4-page response to the paper, which I would also encourage you to read. The day they received the email, they got back in touch with me. I visited them in New York and then also in Cambridge to do some follow-up. So they've definitely been on this. And with the new API, their self-reported results, you can see the numbers are a little different this time around. So key takeaways here. 1, change is possible by focusing on performance gaps. So it's not the case that it's too hard or it's not possible, it's if it's a priority. The other thing that we gather from this research is intersectionality matters, right? Aggregate statistics can amass very important differences, and no one subgroup should be a substitute for representing all of humanity, no matter which subgroup that happens to be. And then finally, we learned about the dangers of supremely white data. If existing data sets, and here I'm focused on faces, but it's not just limited to faces, give us a false sense of progress because of poor representation of the majority of the world, there's often language about minorities, there's often languages about protected classes, etc., and I think all of that is important. But let's be clear, we're missing the majority of the world, so we need to do quite a bit better. But besides just asking how accurate this technology is, we also have to ask how is this technology used? And this is what I'm doing through the IEEE, starting a new set of benchmarks focused on automated facial analysis technology. So if anybody wants to be part of establishing international standards with me, both in terms of accuracy and performance, but also in terms of context and limitations, please let me know. All right, your turn. Questions?
Thank you for that fantastic presentation. My question for you is this. Is it a good thing to be machine readable? So you've mentioned the downside of being not machine readable, of misclassification, but given our concerns about privacy, shouldn't we resist machine readability? Is it good to improve the accuracy?
Right, how this technology is used is absolutely critical. And so when you have a case, for example, going back to the beginning, where you have communities of color who are most likely to be targeted by police, but least represented in the training sets, least represented in the benchmarks that are used to validate this work in the first place, right? I don't necessarily think the only question is accuracy. It's about how it's being used for sure. Maybe I want to be in the white mask. Maybe I don't want you to see me. I absolutely believe that's valid.
Thank you for the great talk. Quick question. Did you investigate, like, given the skin type or given the gender, what's the accuracy for the other attribute?
I'm sorry, I didn't get the question.
Oh, given like one of the two attributes, like given the fact that you know my gender, did you investigate what's the accuracy for the other attribute? So like.
Oh, I see what you're saying. No, I did a very simple investigation and then also showed, as IBM demonstrated, that when you do have more inclusive training data, you can do a better job.
Hi, thank you for that amazing talk and great work. I wanted to channel Inderpal Graval, who was saying last week at a conference that predictive analytics draws from vast amounts of data that are already racialized. So it seems that one paper after the other, and especially yours, shows that the sources that we use to make machine learning historically are already very racialized, either for the convenience of certain populations or, like in the DNA databases, predominantly including black and brown bodies. What is your greater vision? What should this community prioritize to address this instead of just showing that this is the case? What could we do to improve, and not just one point, but across the board? Thanks.
Sure, that's a great question. I think it's no surprise that I and Dr. Gebru authored this paper as Black women. And I think one thing we can do as a community, if we care about inclusion, if we care about addressing issues of race, we need to also be more inclusive with who's working on this kind of technology.
Hi, this is an amazing talk, thank you. I'm really thinking a lot about it. I'm a researcher here at the law school. I work on wrongful convictions, and I'm very interested in how facial recognition technology is driving initial arrest and finding of a suspect. In wrongful convictions, generally, an initial misidentification is one of the biggest drivers of an ultimate wrongful conviction, and so I didn't know about this database in the US. I mostly work on China, actually, but I'm wondering if you can speak just a little bit to the database is quite big. Is this used a lot? Do you know how many jurisdictions this is in? Is the technology being used the same as the 3 technologies you just identified? Do we know? And we can talk more later, but I'm just
Sure.
basic context, very, very curious.
Right,
about
so
how
I
widespread
would like to direct everybody to perpetuallineup.org. So some of my collaborators at Georgetown Law did a 1-year investigation of over 100 police departments, which is how they found out there are over 130 million adults in these data systems. And oftentimes these images are collected from passport photos or driver's license photos. I'm not sure if you've gone to get a new driver's license and you've seen they ask you to take off the glasses and not smile. It makes it a lot easier to enroll you into these data sets. As far as how it's being used, there's a lack of transparency, and so there are more calls for increased transparency and accountability, but that has yet to unfold.
Thank you.
Hey, Joy. My question's about your use of the Fitzpatrick skin type scale.
Sure.
So it's a really interesting choice to, kind of not use racial classification, especially since it's so dependent on national context. But did you consider other types of phenotypical classification, or did you just quickly settle on Fitzpatrick?
Given that my thesis was due in 2 months after I decided to do this investigation, when I found the Fitzpatrick, I said, okay, we'll look at skin type for now, but there are many other phenotypic attributes that could have been used, so this was just the beginning. And again, the Fitzpatrick has its limitations, even though it's a gold standard. So one of the major takeaways I've learned is to question gold, right? How golden is it? I don't know.
Thank you.
Okay, I think there's one more question and then a cut. Oh, we're cutting. So sorry, Meg.
All right. Thank you. Thank you.